Preface. In today's complex society, achieving a balance between freedom and prosperity is a thought-provoking question. The book Narrow Corridor, States, Societies, and the Fate of Liberty, co-authored by Daron Acemoglu and James A. Robinson, attempts to explore the relationship between the state and society, and its impact on freedom and prosperity, through historical and societal perspectives. Both authors are renowned economists, known for their insightful understanding of political economy. Acemoglu is a professor of economics at MIT, and Robinson is a professor of government at Harvard University. Their research suggests that the state's capacity and societal engagement are key to achieving liberty. The book has received generally positive reviews from the academic community, with many praising its theoretical contributions to understanding how the state shapes economic and social development. Their previous work, Why Nations Fail, has become an important reference in modern economics and political science. The book's background stems from in-depth historical analysis, particularly focusing on different nations' choices between liberty and despotism. By meticulously examining historical events, the authors reveal how states and societies have formed dynamic balances in the struggle for power. The book's reception has been enthusiastic, with many readers stating that its profound insights offer crucial guidance for contemporary political and economic issues. Reading this book, readers will discover many knowledge points relevant to contemporary life. For example, understanding how to use societal participation to counterbalance state power, and how to find possibilities for freedom within complex social structures. This knowledge not only helps us better understand the workings of today's society but also inspires the courage to pursue greater freedom and justice in our daily lives. Preface *. Body *. In Chapter 6, the authors delve into how Europe, within its historical context, formed a unique state structure that constrained Leviathan, a state that was both capable and constrained by society. Although the origins of agriculture lie primarily in the Middle East and China, Europe, through its unique political and social structures, gradually rose to prominence on the historical stage, forging a distinct civilization. While the centralized system inherited from the Roman Empire might suggest a lack of freedom, this chapter argues that the combination of Germanic democratic traditions and Roman bureaucratic institutions fostered societal freedom and prosperity. The authors emphasize that a strong state does not necessarily lead to the suppression of freedom, but rather, a delicate balance between state power and societal forces actually contributes to the development of freedom. By analyzing the parliamentary politics of the early Frankish kingdom and Clovis's conversion to Christianity, the authors reveal how a balance was struck between two blades: Roman centralization and Germanic democratic traditions, thereby driving societal freedom and economic prosperity. This process was slow and painful, yet a necessary outcome of historical evolution. As the authors state, this development was both complex and contingent. These historical lessons demonstrate that for any state to successfully navigate the historical corridor, it must find a balance between strong state institutions and a society capable of constraining state power, a principle applicable not only to Europe but also offering valuable insights into the historical development of other regions. Chapter 7 explores the concept of mandate of heaven and its profound impact on Chinese politics and society, highlighting the importance of trust between rulers and the populace. As the book states, a state that loses the trust of its people cannot stand, a viewpoint reflecting the core tenets of Confucianism in governance. Contrary to conventional wisdom, the spring and autumn period showcased relatively active public political participation, a phenomenon that gradually faded under subsequent autocratic rule. Simultaneously, legalism and Confucianism found common ground to some degree. While legalists like Shang Yang emphasized strict rule of law, they also acknowledged that the moral conduct of the ruler is crucial to social stability, illustrating the dialectical relationship between morality and law in governance. Economically, while China experienced periods of economic prosperity, such prosperity often came at the cost of public freedom, reflecting the limitations of economic development under an autocratic system. As the book notes, the weaker the people, the stronger the state, a principle epitomized by the Qin dynasty, which achieved unification and prosperity in the short term but also sowed seeds of social discontent. During the Han dynasty, rulers attempted to combine Confucian and legalist thought, maintaining state strength while also addressing the needs of the people. However, true prosperity consistently depended on public participation and freedom. This historical lesson reminds us that no amount of economic growth can replace public freedom and participation. Mencius's statement, "When you gain the hearts of the people, you gain the people," emphasizes the rulers need to focus on the needs of the people to gain legitimacy. Ultimately, prosperity built on a healthy political system forms the foundation for sustained social development. Through this review, we can readily observe that historical changes have not only shaped the face of society but also provided valuable lessons and warnings for future governance. In India, a nation declaring itself a democracy since 1950, genuine democracy is constrained by the deeply entrenched caste system. Although the law allows marriages between different castes, actual social norms and pressures make such marriages nearly impossible, a phenomenon vividly illustrated by the story of Manoj and Babli. This couple eloped for love, only to face intense social opposition due to belonging to the same gotra, leading to a tragic outcome. The caste system not only restricts personal marital choices but also profoundly impacts societal economic opportunities and mobility. As mentioned in the text, in India's caste system, there are strict endogamous rules, meaning that people must marry within their own caste. These endogamous rules trap many young people like Manoj and Babli in endless hardship. While Dalit groups are legally protected from discrimination and violence in practice remain widespread. This is not merely a tragedy of individual cases but reflects a deeper societal problem. The caste system means that, while India's democratic institutions exist on the surface, due to the divisions created by the caste system, democratic politics have not effectively promoted social unity and development. The state's governance capacity is limited by the deeply rooted caste system, hindering its ability to fully perform its functions. Through Manoj and Babli's story, this chapter reveals the profound impact of the caste system on individual lives and social structures, highlighting the absence of the Red Queen effect in India. Ultimately, this structural inequality exacerbates societal poverty and impedes national progress and development. As one character states, she brought him her perfectly good phone to repair. When he questioned her, she replied, "Of course there is no problem. I just wanted to see you again." This statement not only represents the yearning for personal affection but also reflects the profound loneliness and helplessness experienced under the oppression of the caste system. In this chapter, the authors explore the vastly different political and social structures that emerged in European nations despite similar initial conditions, emphasizing the importance of the power balance between the state and society for national development. Using Switzerland, Prussia, and Montenegro as examples, Switzerland, known for being extremely armed and free, demonstrates how military mobilization not only enhanced state capacity but also fostered democratic development, creating unique social cohesion. However, Prussia presented a stark contrast. While it was an army with a state, its powerful military strength failed to bring societal freedom and prosperity, instead leading to autocratic rule. This phenomenon challenges the conventional wisdom of an inherent relationship between strong states and societal freedom. Furthermore, the authors highlight the significant impact of historical context on the state-society relationship. For example, although Prussia was militarily strong, a lack of effective social checks and balances ultimately led to its centralized path. In sharp contrast, Poland transitioned rapidly to democracy after the collapse of the Soviet Union, while Russia, lacking effective social mobilization, failed to achieve a similar transformation. This suggests that a lack of centralization does not necessarily lead to chaos. It might, in certain ways, preserve a degree of freedom. Finally, the authors mention that the hatred and fear between families are stronger than the fear of the enemy, illustrating how lingering historical social dynamics played a crucial role in the development of different nations. In summary, this chapter, through a comparison of Switzerland, Prussia, and Montenegro, reveals the delicate balance between state capacity and societal forces, and the complexity and diversity of history in shaping this relationship. On August 9, 2014, the shooting of 18-year-old African-American Michael Brown by police officer Daron Wilson in Ferguson, Missouri, epitomized racial tensions. As the report stated, the Ferguson Police Department, FPD, did not practice justice, it practiced ticketing. This event not only sparked nationwide protests and riots but also exposed systemic harassment and violence against black people in the area. Shockingly, despite the U.S. Constitution and Bill of Rights aiming to protect civil rights, many local law enforcement agencies could make arrests and searches without reasonable cause, contradicting common understanding. The Department of Justice investigation revealed the FBD's unlawful arrests and excessive force without reasonable suspicion, clearly violating the Fourth Amendment. Even more alarmingly, police violence in Ferguson was not an isolated incident but a widespread problem in many cities across the nation, particularly prominent in impoverished and minority communities. Studies show that people living in these communities experience post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, at a rate as high as 46%, a figure exceeding that of many combat veterans, which is shocking. The exposure of the Ferguson incident was not merely a violation of individual rights but also a profound reflection on American social structures and institutions. All of this indicates that active societal participation and mobilization are key to driving legal and policy change. As one scholar noted, in Ferguson, the roots of violence and inequality demand a greater degree of attention and action. Therefore, Ferguson was not just a tragedy, it also calls for greater societal attention and reflection on inequality and violence, prompting a re-evaluation of the roles of public-private partnerships in law enforcement and social services. In Argentina, a significant contradiction exists between the state's existence and its actual functionality. As someone stated, in Argentina, the state is not absent, it exists, possessing complex laws and a large bureaucracy, but its functioning is chaotic and ineffective. This vividly portrays the reality of Argentina's complex bureaucratic system, which, while appearing prosperous on the surface, is actually inefficient. Many mistakenly believe that modern state bureaucracies are efficient and rational. However, in Argentina, this system is slow, ambiguous, and uncertain, deviating entirely from Weber's description of an ideal bureaucracy. Faced with this system, Argentinians often can only respond with resignation. You have to stay calm, be patient. Here, you have to be patient. This resigned adaptation reflects the long waits and uncertainty encountered by citizens seeking welfare and public services. More concerning is that Argentinians are not citizens with rights but rather patients of the state, their well-being often dependent on an unreliable system. This imbalance of power renders the populace powerless in terms of social mobilization, while the political elite are not eager to enhance the state's governance capacity, as this might trigger social mobilization and threaten their rule. In this context, Argentina's paper tiger not only fails to govern effectively but also exacerbates social inequality and instability. Therefore, the gap between the state's existence and its governance capacity is not only worrying but also reflects a state that is both repressive and incompetent. In such an environment, Argentinian citizens' rights are weakened, the state's capacity is severely questioned, and a dependency on power is formed rather than the enjoyment of rights. In Saudi Arabia, the combination of power and Wahhabism creates a social framework that represses individual freedom, prompting reflection on why, in many nations, societal restrictions tend to ease after successful nation-building, while in Saudi Arabia, they become stricter and more oppressive. As the text mentions, in the West, and particularly in Saudi Arabia, the Middle East is perceived as a symbol of the absence of freedom, where personal liberty is restricted by customs, religion, and autocracy. Wahhabism, not a traditional religion but a relatively new doctrine, emphasizes strict adherence to tradition, even employing military expansion to achieve its goals. The spread of this doctrine, particularly during Abdulaziz's conquest of the Arabian Peninsula, unified the region under a single state for the first time, but it also brought strict limitations on social behavior. In this environment, women's rights are particularly vulnerable. While many men support women working, religious laws and social norms still tightly bind women's freedom. As the original text states, all great religions are flexible, capable of accepting multiple interpretations and implementations, otherwise how could they have spread so successfully? However, in Saudi Arabia, this flexibility seems challenged by Wahhabism, leaving women dependent on male guardians in many aspects. This oppressive structure not only reflects Saudi Arabia's unique situation but also reveals repressive social norms prevalent throughout the Middle East. Therefore, analyzing Saudi Arabia's power dynamics requires attention to the intertwining of religion and autocracy, leading to a lack of individual freedom and high social repression. Chapter 13, The Red Queen Runs Amok, delves into the Weimar Republic's collapse and the Nazi Party's rise, revealing the underlying causes of this historical turning point. Although the Weimar Republic established a vibrant democracy, extreme voter polarization and widespread distrust of existing institutions allowed the rise of extremist parties. As Otto Wels, leader of the Social Democratic Party, stated when facing Nazi intimidation, "At this moment in history, we German Social Democrats solemnly declare our loyalty to the basic principles of humanity and justice, freedom and socialism." However, such loyalty proved incredibly fragile in the context of extreme politics. The Nazi Party's rise wasn't solely reliant on violence. It cleverly exploited the economic crisis of the Great Depression of 1929, using social mobilization to attract support from the middle class and young people. While the Nazi Party garnered only 2.6% of the vote in the 1928 election, its influence rapidly increased with growing social unrest. As the book points out, the democratically elected legislature had voted itself out of existence, a phenomenon reflecting the dual nature of social mobilization, seemingly promoting democracy, yet potentially leading to a yearning for authority, thus paving the way for the establishment of dictatorial rule. Ultimately, German society, in an atmosphere of fear and extreme politics, chose to abandon democracy in favor of dictatorship, a historical lesson worth pondering. The Weimar Republic's collapse was not an isolated incident but the result of deep-seated political and social contradictions, reminding us to be wary of the potential risks of social mobilization when facing power shifts. In the complex transition of South African history, the burden borne by black people becomes increasingly evident. Solplaatje, in his work Native Life in South Africa, mentions, "The burden of the native consists in faithfully performing all the unskilled, and lowest paid, labor in South Africa, while the native locations remain neglected." This description vividly illustrates the marginalized status of black people in their own country. While the establishment of the unified South African government in 1910 initially aimed to grant black people more political rights, the outcome was counterproductive. Black people not only failed to obtain their due rights but faced even more systematic dispossession. This phenomenon is reflected in the overthrow of apartheid in 1994. The African National Congress, ANC, successfully established a new alliance. However, this alliance, composed of the ANC, the black middle class, and white industrialists, acted as a protector of white interests to some extent. As some argue, through the Black Economic Empowerment schemes, white businesses managed to protect their interests under the new system, with black people being treated as tools for economic transformation. Surprisingly, the so-called economic empowerment schemes were not solely intended to help black people but to ensure that existing white economic interests remained unharmed. Furthermore, South Africa's transition wasn't a simple democratization process but was achieved through complex social and economic alliances. This phenomenon fully reflects the views of Free State farmers on the native question, who generally believed that solving the native question meant re-establishing slavery. This counterintuitive perspective reflects how, even though history has moved forward, deep-seated racial and economic structures continue to influence society's trajectory. Therefore, this chapter emphasizes the crucial role of social mobilization in South Africa's transition, stating that South Africa's success is closely related to its historical context, the balance of political power, and the relationship between society and the state. By forming a broad social alliance, South Africa successfully entered a more open corridor, laying the foundation for future democratic development. This process was not merely a reorganization of political power but also a profound reflection on the past system of racial discrimination. When discussing the welfare state and its profound impact on the relationship between society and the state, Hayek's deep concerns about state intervention cannot be ignored. His assertion that the socialist state planning and administrative regulation of the economy could evolve into a form of totalitarianism certainly sparked much discussion. However, the actual experience of Scandinavian countries contrasts sharply with Hayek's expectations. Although Hayek warned that the goals of the welfare state could lead to changes in social psychology, thus threatening the spirit of a free society, this model has not resulted in despotism but has, in fact, coincided with the deepening of democracy. After World War II, Britain's Beveridge Report laid the foundation for the welfare state, driving the implementation of policies such as universal healthcare and minimum wage, which were widely welcomed. This shows that social mobilization and state capacity expansion are not a zero-sum game but can simultaneously promote the ability of both society and the state. Hayek's concerns were to some extent justified, but Scandinavian countries, through active social mobilization and democratic participation, successfully integrated state capacity with societal needs, thereby consolidating democratic institutions. This demonstrates that social mobilization is crucial for maintaining the balance between the state and society. Only when society can effectively monitor and participate in state policies can the abuse of state power be prevented. Therefore, the success of the welfare state depends not only on the expansion of state capacity but also on active societal participation and oversight. As the book states, people's political ideals and attitudes toward authority are both the result and the cause of political institutions, emphasizing the interactive relationship between society and the state. By establishing broad social consensus and cooperation, the relationship between the state and society is strengthened, avoiding the extreme outcomes that Hayek warned against, thus laying the foundation for a more inclusive democratic society. Emily Davison, a prominent figure in the British suffrage movement, profoundly impacted the course of social mobilization through her death in 1913 while fighting for women's suffrage. While many see her death as an isolated incident, this tragedy sparked public outrage and grief and became a powerful symbol for the subsequent women's rights movement. As some commented, Davison's action was her desperate fight against an unjust system, even though she knew it might cost her life. Her extreme act of rushing onto the racecourse during a horse race challenged societal perceptions of women's roles and brought attention to the overlooked issue of women's suffrage. Many believed that advocating for women's suffrage should rely on moderate protests and lobbying. However, Davison's action showed that dramatic events can effectively promote social change. Her death made more people realize that women's suffrage is not only a personal right but also a symbol of social justice. At her funeral, tens of thousands of supporters took to the streets to pay their respects and express their desire for women's suffrage. Davison's story reminds us that while social change is often considered gradual, her sacrifice proves that sometimes fierce struggle can accelerate societal awakening and change, prompting a re-evaluation of social justice. Emily Davison's death was not only a personal tragedy but also a turning point in history, driving the progress of women's suffrage and laying a strong foundation for future feminist movements. In Thomas Hobbes's classic work, Leviathan, he profoundly explores the origins of human society and the formation of the state, presenting theories that subvert traditional beliefs. Hobbes points out that, in the state of nature, the life of man is solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short, challenging the common belief that human nature is inherently good. He believes that individual selfishness and competitiveness make people prone to conflict and violence in the absence of social constraints. To avoid endless conflict, people voluntarily relinquish certain freedoms in exchange for security and peace, a process Hobbes calls the social contract. In his theory, absolute sovereignty is a depression but a necessary condition for maintaining social order, which might surprise many, as the concentration of power is usually seen as leading to tyranny. However, Hobbes argues that only through a strong government can greater chaos be avoided, a viewpoint that remains relevant today. Hobbes's Leviathan is not only a powerful central authority but also an artificial god with absolute power, necessary to ensure social stability and security. This concept sparked widespread discussion and controversy at the time, prompting people to reconsider the complex relationship between power, freedom, and society. Hobbes's social contract theory challenges traditional moral concepts, arguing that moral norms are established through the formation of contracts, not through the inherent goodness of humanity. Through these theories, Hobbes laid the foundation for modern political philosophy and exerted a profound influence on subsequent social contract theories. Therefore, his ideas have not only enriched the connotations of political philosophy but also provided a new perspective on understanding the relationship between power and society. In exploring the complex relationship between political power and social norms in ancient Greece, the ostracism of Themistocles serves as a significant case study. As some scholars point out, Themistocles' ostracism was not merely a personal failure but a profound reflection on Athenian social norms. This event reveals how the apparent democratic equality in ancient Athenian politics masked underlying power struggles. While Themistocles demonstrated exceptional wartime leadership and won popular support, his popularity didn't guarantee his power in political struggles. This phenomenon challenges the common-sense notion that popularity determines power. In fact, the Athenian ostracism system wasn't simply a punitive mechanism but a preventative measure aimed at protecting democracy and preventing excessive concentration of power. Therefore, by ostracizing Themistocles, Athenian citizens expressed their strong dissatisfaction with the concentration of power, highlighting the sense of social responsibility within a democratic system. This incident demonstrates that in ancient Greece, social norms and collective sentiment played a crucial role in determining the fate of politicians. As the power of social norms reveals, individual ability and achievement weren't the only determining factors. Through this case, we can gain a deeper understanding of the subtle relationship between power and norms in ancient Greek society, challenging our traditional understanding of democracy and power. Review **. Many current social issues and challenges can be deeply analyzed from a historical perspective to better understand and address them. By studying different historical events and political theories, we can extract a series of important points that are not only valuable for academic research but also provide rich food for thought and inspiration for ordinary readers. First, the complexity and contingency of history are important keys to understanding contemporary society. Many historical events are not caused by single factors but are the result of an interplay of multiple forces. For example, in the historical development of Europe, the legacy of the Roman Empire and the democratic traditions of the Germanic tribes combined to form the constrained Leviathan, a state form that was both effectively governed and constrained by society. This understanding of the delicate balance between state and societal forces provides insights into the political governance of many countries today, especially when facing conflicts between state power and civil liberties. Second, the power of social mobilization has repeatedly demonstrated its importance throughout history. Whether it is China's mandate of heaven theory, India's caste system, or even the Ferguson event in the United States, social mobilization is often a key factor in driving social change. Emily Davison's protest and the subsequent women's suffrage movement used social mobilization to bring widespread attention to unjust systems. Today, in the face of issues such as gender equality, racial discrimination, and social justice, social mobilization remains an important force for change. Third, the relationship between the state and society is an important dimension of understanding modern politics. In the case of Argentina, although the state formally exists, its bureaucratic inefficiency and corruption prevent effective governance, leading to public distrust in the government. This phenomenon is common in many countries, particularly in those facing economic crises and social unrest. Therefore, establishing an efficient and transparent government and enhancing public participation and trust are important ways to achieve social stability and development. Furthermore, historical lessons also tell us that democracy is not achieved overnight but requires time and effort to maintain and deepen. The collapse of the Weimar Republic and the rise of the Nazi Party were due to social distrust of democratic institutions and a tilt towards extremism. This lesson reminds us that the establishment of democratic institutions requires active public participation and effective supervision of power. Only when all sectors of society work together can the recurrence of historical tragedies be avoided. Finally, the dialectical relationship between the concentration and dispersion of power is reflected in many historical events. Hobbes's Leviathan theory emphasizes the importance of a strong central authority in maintaining social order, but history has repeatedly shown that excessive concentration of power often leads to despotism and repression. Therefore, establishing a state that is both effectively governed and constrained by society is an important goal of modern political development. In summary, through profound historical reflection, we can extract a series of points that are of great significance to contemporary society. These points not only help us understand the complexity and diversity behind history, but also provide valuable insights when facing the challenges of today's society. Whether it is state governance, social mobilization, or democratic construction, history provides us with important lessons and experiences that are worth reflecting on and learning from.